I still remember the very first time I saw him, Maxwell Granger. He stepped into the main office like he already owned the place, dressed in a sharp black suit, a Rolex catching the light, and confidence radiating from every inch of his tall 6-foot frame, though it was clear he had no idea what we actually did. "Call me Max," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I like things lean, fast, and efficient. We're about to make some big moves starting right now." There was a pause, then the kind of awkward applause you only hear at company meetings or kids' school performances. I stayed silent. Arms folded. I'd been at Nexera Systems for nearly 9 years by then, surviving 2 CEOs, 4 company shakeups, and a corporate buyout. I knew the game well. But Max? He was about to find out just how it's played. The first week with him was pure chaos. He canceled our usual project review meetings and swapped them for vision strategy syncs. By Thursday, he'd already fired 3 middle managers, 2 by email. Then he started messing with our flagship software, despite not understanding its architecture. That product, I'd built it 6 years earlier after a failed acquisition, almost sank the company. I designed a back-end infrastructure that was streamlined, secure, and scalable. Not only did I design it, but I also patented the system in my name, a move encouraged by the former CEO who told me, "Emma, if you ever leave, we'll be begging you to come back." It was tucked away in my contract, just another clause most executives never bothered to read. Max hadn't read a thing by the second week. He was calling me tech lead instead of my real title, Director of Systems Architecture. A small jab, but revealing. He avoided eye contact during meetings, cut me off mid-sentence, and praised junior staff for ideas I'd already presented. Classic power moves: demean, discredit, dismiss. I kept my composure like always, but I started keeping records of everything. Then came Friday morning. Max swaggered into my office, leaned against the doorframe like some bad TV executive, and said, "Emma, can we talk?" I motioned toward the chair across from me. He didn't sit. "I'll be straightforward," he said, with that kind of bluntness men use when they think they're doing you a favor. "You've been here a long time, maybe too long. Things are changing, and we need people who move at a different speed." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for the rest. What he really meant was, "I'm letting you go. Effective immediately. Your position's redundant. You'll get severance. HR has the paperwork." It was so rehearsed, so smug, I almost laughed instead. I leaned back, studied him. He had no clue what I owned. No idea what that one line in my contract meant. No idea that without my explicit written consent, the company legally couldn't keep using the system that ran 82% of its operations. But I said nothing. Just smiled, a calm, polite, deliberate smile. "Understood," I said, standing up to shake his hand. He ignored it, just nodded and turned away like I was already dead to him. As he left, he threw one last line over his shoulder. "I'm not about to waste a dime on an incompetent employee who peaked 5 years ago." My smile didn't falter. "Good luck, Max." He paused at the door, probably puzzled by my calm, then left. I packed my things slowly and methodically. A few personal items, a plant I'd somehow kept alive for 5 years, a USB stick holding nothing but photos from our last team off-site. Walking through the open-plan office, some heads turned. Some averted their eyes, embarrassed. Others gave small, sympathetic nods. No one said a word. That's how fear spreads in places like this, quietly. By the time I got to my car, my hands trembled. Not from sadness, but adrenaline. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was curious. How long until they realized what they'd done? I already knew the answer. Monday. The weekend crawled by like a brewing storm. Quiet, heavy, full of tension. I didn't tell a soul I'd been fired. Not my sister, who always said I worked too hard. Not my best friend, who would have shown up with red wine and a 5-point revenge plan. Definitely not my ex-husband, who once called me too intense and married to my work. I needed silence, space, perspective. On Friday night, I took a long walk through the city, past empty cafes and closed bookstores, letting the cold air numb the sting of betrayal. I wasn't grieving the job. I was mourning the insult, the ignorance, the fact that someone who never wrote a single line of code could just walk in, erase years of blood and sweat, and label it redundant. By Saturday morning, I was ready to act. I pulled out my contract from my personal files. Everything was there in black and white. The patent under my name, the notarized clause granting me full rights over the system I built. Nexra had a licensing agreement for its use, one that required my explicit involvement for renewals, updates, or scaling. That agreement was set to expire Monday. I let out a small, ironic laugh, not because it was funny, but because the timing was perfect. By 3 p.m., I'd emailed Nexora's legal department, not from my old company account, which was already deactivated, but from my personal address. The subject was straightforward. Notice of intellectual property usage expiration, immediate attention required. The message was calm, factual, no drama. A reminder that, per our licensing agreement, the company's rights to use the system would expire at midnight Sunday, unless renegotiated directly with me. The patent holder failure to comply would breach IP law, and continued use beyond that would trigger legal action. I signed it formally. Emma Langford, inventor, Nexra Backend Architecture, patent no US 9347901B. I CC'd their legal counsel, our former CTO, and yes, Max. Then I closed my laptop and went for a run. 4 miles through foggy side streets, dodging tourists and street vendors, feeling the tension melt away. By Sunday afternoon, my phone started lighting up. 2 missed calls from an unknown number, a voicemail from HR. Emma, we'd like to clarify something about your separation agreement. Another from legal. Please contact us ASAP to discuss your prior agreement with the company. And finally, late that night, an email from Max himself. Subject: Urgent contract misunderstanding. Emma, I believe there's been a miscommunication. I'd like to speak with you directly to clear the air and resolve this before business resumes Monday. Please call me ASAP. There it was. The panic. I didn't reply. Let them stew. Let them come to work Monday morning and realize the entire company's infrastructure depended on me. The scheduling system, the CRM, the API integrations, the automated reports, and the client portals all relied on a license that was no longer valid. I wasn't after revenge. I wanted respect. And if that respect came wrapped in frantic emails and emergency legal meetings, then so be it. When Monday finally came, I had already been awake for hours. Coffee brewed, phone fully charged, laptop open. I sat on my couch, dressed in leggings and an oversized hoodie, watching the clock inch toward 8 a.m., the official start of the Nexra workday. At exactly 8:07, my inbox blew up: system error, backend authentication failure. Urgent clients can't access the dashboard. Emma, please call me now. From Max. Shortly after, a message popped up from Nicole, an old friend on the product team. Nicole, did you do this? Please tell me you did. Max is losing it. Systems down, meetings canceled, clients nonstop. The board's involved. I smiled, not out of spite, but with clarity. This wasn't sabotage. This was what happens when those in power assume competence without proof and dismiss value without understanding it. At 8:31, my phone rang. This time, I answered. Emma. Max's voice cracked over the line, forced calm, barely hiding full-blown panic. We need to talk. I had no idea about the patent situation. Let's get you back in the office. I cut him off gently. I'm happy to talk, Max, but not about a job. We're discussing licensing now, as an external partner. Silence. Emma, he said, voice dropping. Let's not make this personal. Oh, I replied. It's not personal, it's contractual. Then I hung up. And just like that, the real negotiation began. I walked into Nexra's building at 9:12 a.m. Monday, not through the back employee entrance, but the front lobby. My heels clicked sharply on the marble floor, crisp and intentional, a sound unfamiliar after years of sneaking in with a travel mug and laptop bag. This wasn't a return, it was a reintroduction. The receptionist blinked at me. Miss Langford. I smiled. I have a meeting with legal. She nodded quickly, clearly caught off guard, and dialed with a slight tremble in her hand. I could feel the energy shift, the way conversations paused mid-sentence, the furtive glances from employees pretending not to stare. Take the elevator to the 7th floor, she said. They're waiting. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored panel, confident, composed. But inside, my heart was pounding, not from fear, but from focus. I'd spent the weekend preparing, not just to defend my work, but to assert my worth. Inside the legal conference room, the mood was cautious. The general counsel rose to greet me, followed by 2 internal legal team members and a senior advisor I recognized from a past merger. Max wasn't there. I sat at the far end of the table. "Let them come to me." "Emma," the general counsel began, voice smooth but clipped. "We appreciate you coming in. We want to resolve this amicably." "Of course," I replied. "I'm all for clean resolutions. I assume you've reviewed the licensing agreement?" He nodded. "We have. Your claims are valid. The system patent is registered under your name, and continued use without your consent is a violation. The renewal expired at midnight, as stated." A pause. Then he leaned forward. "We'd like to propose a retroactive 1-year licensing extension. Same terms, full operational access." I smiled. "That won't work for me." A murmur rippled through the room. The advisor scribbled notes. "I'm not here to return to the same terms," I said calmly. "I'm here to renegotiate fairly. You're currently experiencing downtime, correct?" They hesitated. "I've been told it's affecting all client-facing platforms, internal reporting, and developer access." The counsel nodded. "Yes." "Then let's talk numbers," I said. "I want $1.2 million for the next 12 months, non-exclusive, renewable quarterly, with full system support through me, or a consulting team I approve, plus public acknowledgement of the patent in company documentation." This wasn't a bluff. It was a market-aligned figure reflecting the system's reach and impact. The silence told me they hadn't expected me to come prepared like this. One legal associate cleared her throat. "That's a significant increase." "It reflects value, something this company seems to have forgotten how to measure." The counsel leaned back, loosening his tie, jaw clenched. "We'll need to take this to the board." "I'll wait," I said simply. "But know that every hour of delay harms client trust, your reputation, and stock value. I advise moving quickly." They didn't argue at 10:03 a.m., waiting outside the conference room with water and my phone on silent. I spotted Max pacing beyond the glass. He hadn't seen me. When he finally did, his expression froze, shifting from confusion to recognition. He walked toward me, steps slower than usual, controlled. "Emma," he said, voice forced polite. "I didn't expect you'd come in person." "No, Max," I replied evenly. "You didn't expect a lot of things." "I think this has gone too far," he started, hands in pockets, trying for casual. "We should have talked before lawyers got involved." "You mean before you fired me?" I raised an eyebrow. That decision was based on incomplete information. "No," I said, standing. "That decision was ego-driven. Now you're dealing with the fallout." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "I'm not angry, Max. I'm done being underestimated. I've documented everything, the patent, licensing terms, your email firing me without cause. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to negotiate. If you want to salvage this deal, maybe your job, you'll let legal handle it." His jaw tightened. I walked past him toward the meeting room. "Oh, and Max," I called over my shoulder. "Good luck." That word again. Luck, something I never needed. By noon, the conference room filled again, but the energy was different, tighter, sharper. The board hadn't joined, but I could feel their presence behind every word the legal team spoke. The stakes had shifted. What began as a misunderstanding was now a full legal crisis with operational and shareholder consequences. I didn't flinch. The general counsel sat across from me, looking less polished, tie loosened, jaw clenched. "We've reviewed your proposal," he said carefully, "and while we find the terms aggressive—" "Accurate," I corrected. He paused, nodded. "Accurate. We're prepared to accept the licensing rate with a caveat, a 6-month contract, renewable quarterly, as you suggested." The request for public acknowledgement was met with hesitation. We'd prefer to call it technical collaboration rather than full patent credit, the general counsel offered. I leaned forward firmly. "No." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Excuse me?" I continued. "I want it stated clearly and publicly. System designed and patented by Emma Langford. No euphemisms, no watered-down language." This company has run on my architecture for 6 years, and you've all benefited from it. I won't walk away anonymous, so Max can save face." The room fell silent. The associate to my left glanced at her notes, but said nothing. The advisor scribbled again. The counsel adjusted his glasses. "We'll take that to the board." "Do that," I said, gathering my folder. "And while you're at it, I'd advise transparency. The SEC doesn't take kindly to undisclosed licensing conflicts that impact system performance." That statement landed hard, like a hammer. It's the reality no one wants aired publicly, how a single system's failure, especially one tied to intellectual property misuse, can erode investor confidence, trigger audits, or even threaten delisting. I knew their playbook better than they realized, and now I had mine. As I stepped into the corridor, I spotted Nicole near the elevators. She gave me a look, half shock, half admiration. "They're calling you the firewall upstairs," she said with a grin. I smiled faintly. "Better than redundant." She laughed, then lowered her voice. "People are talking. Emma Max is spinning for the board, saying it's all a misunderstanding, claiming you never disclosed the licensing expiration." "That's a lie," I said calmly. "But let him talk. Truth doesn't need volume." Nicole leaned closer. "Everyone saw the memo you CC'd legal before the deadline. There's paper everywhere. The interns are whispering like it's Watergate." I didn't reply immediately. My mind was already racing ahead. Reclaiming control wasn't enough. I wanted accountability. The next morning, I sent a follow-up email, not to legal or Max, but directly to the board chair, using an address I'd quietly kept from a past initiative we'd worked on years before. The subject was brief: System licensing, public statement, and leadership conduct. I was respectful, concise, and factual. I outlined the patent's scope and its operational necessity, the termination and licensing conflict timeline, Max's decision to fire a key systems architect without reviewing internal IP obligations, and the false narrative he was pushing. I closed with a pointed question. If this is how he manages internal resources, how can you expect him to handle external partners, vendors, or regulators? That afternoon, a reply came, not from the chair, but a senior board liaison. "Emma, thank you for your clarity and professionalism. We take this seriously. We'll review the matter internally with all your documentation. Meanwhile, we support the licensing arrangement and expect it finalized within 48 hours under your proposed terms. We regret the company's leadership didn't recognize your contributions sooner." I stared at the message for a moment, then leaned back in my chair. It wasn't a public apology, but it was a shift, not just in the story, but in the balance of power. Later that night, Nicole messaged again. "Max is freaking out. The board meets early tomorrow." His assistant said he's calling in favors, trying to control the narrative. I typed back slowly. Let him try. I have the truth, and a paper trail longer than his resume. The next day was going to be more than a licensing deal. It would be a reckoning. The board convened promptly at 9 a.m. on Wednesday. By 9:23, I was looped in. Not by Max or legal, but the board chair himself. The email was brief but clear. "Please join us for a closed session at 11. Your insight will be valuable." That word again. Valuable. 2 weeks ago, I was incompetent. Now I was valuable. The irony was sharp if it hadn't been so telling. At 10:55 a.m., I entered the executive boardroom on Nexra's top floor, a room I'd only stepped into once before, years ago, presenting a system upgrade roadmap with the former CEO back then. I was invisible in the corner today. I strode directly to the chair reserved for me. No hesitation, Max was already there, seated opposite, arms crossed, phone face down like a prop he dared not touch. His tie was perfect, his smile rehearsed, but the worry in his eyes was real. The board chair began with formalities, then turned to me. "Emma, thank you for joining. We've reviewed the licensing terms and your documentation. We'd like to hear your perspective briefly before deliberation." I nodded, of course. I stood, unfolded my notes, but didn't read from them. Instead, I met each board member's gaze and said, "Leadership isn't about control. It's about clarity, knowing the systems that power your company, technical or human. When a new executive enters a system they don't understand, they have two choices: Listen or bulldoze. Max chose bulldoze. Max shifted, but said nothing. He called me incompetent, fired me without review, then ignored the legal implications of the infrastructure he relied on. Worse, he only listened after failure, after servers went dark and clients called. I let that hang. Everything I built was designed to protect this company, but no system can protect you from arrogance. If your CEO doesn't understand your operations architecture or the value of your people, you're not just legally at risk, you're fundamentally at risk. Silence. Then one board member leaned forward. What would you do in his seat? I smiled faintly. I wouldn't be in his seat, I'd be beside someone who understands product, culture, and law. I'd build leadership valuing collaboration over control. And I wouldn't wait for a lawsuit to respect the people who keep this place running. A pause. The chair cleared his throat. Thank you, Emma. You may wait outside while we deliberate. I nodded, stood, and left. 10 minutes later, raised voices came through the wall. Not mine, Max's. He was unraveling, deflecting blame onto legal, the CTO, even HR. His last play, shift blame until it disappears this time. It didn't work at 11:47 a.m. The chair stepped out. Emma, we've concluded we'd like to speak with you privately. I followed him back inside. This time, Max was gone. The chair sat, folding his hands on the table. Immediate effect, he announced. Maxwell Granger is now on administrative leave pending a formal investigation. We will release an updated statement to staff clarifying the situation and publicly recognizing your vital role in Nexra's infrastructure and recovery. He handed me a printed draft of the official message. I read the opening line aloud. We acknowledge Emma Langford's leadership, innovation, and intellectual property as essential to Nexra's success. The words struck me harder than I'd expected. Not because I sought the recognition, but because I understood how many women in technology never receive that credit. What are your thoughts on next steps? The chair inquired. I've accepted the licensing terms, I replied, but I would also like to propose a short-term consulting role. No full-time return. I want to maintain autonomy and help build safeguards so this never happens again. He nodded approvingly. Consider it agreed. Rising to leave, he added, Emma, you didn't just defend the system. You saved this company. I offered a quiet nod. I'm aware. As I exited the room, the heavy burden I'd carried for days began to ease, not all at once, but gradually, like shedding armor I no longer required. Waiting in the hallway was Nicole. He's out, she whispered. I smiled. Suspended for now. And you? She asked. Gazing down the corridor toward the glass walls of the floor where I once worked, I said, this is only the beginning. The internal memo went live at 2:03 p.m. on Friday. Effective immediately, Maxwell Granger has been placed on administrative leave pending a comprehensive review of recent management decisions, including termination protocols and contract oversight. Nexra Systems formally recognizes Emma Langford as the architect of our core infrastructure. Her patent and licensing agreements are now embedded in our official operational policies. We appreciate her ongoing partnership and leadership through this period of transition. Though simple in wording, the announcement hit the company like a thunderclap. By the time I left that day, the previous silence in the hallways had turned into cautious smiles, quick nods, and quiet, "Congratulations," whispered by colleagues who hadn't met my gaze in weeks. I wasn't seeking revenge or vindication. I wanted acknowledgement. More importantly, I wanted change. On the following Monday, I met again with legal, not in crisis mode, but to introduce a new framework designed to protect internal innovations and shield employees from leadership misconduct. The plan included automatic reviews of IP contracts during leadership changes, anonymous whistleblower channels reporting directly to the board, and a mentorship program for junior engineers emphasizing ownership, recognition, and boundary setting. I wasn't merely aiming to win. I wanted to leave behind lasting reform. Within the week, the consulting contract was finalized. I committed to a 90-day term, assisting in stabilizing systems post-crisis and preparing the next lead architect to succeed me. On my terms, at my pace, many asked if I'd be returning full-time. My answer remained no, because although I loved the work, the company, and I, had evolved one afternoon, 2 weeks into consulting. After a long meeting, I stood outside the building and noticed a group of interns passing by. A young woman wearing thick glasses and sporting a nervous smile paused and asked, "Are you Emma Langford?" I nodded. Her face brightened. "I just wanted to say thank you what you did. It's kind of legendary. We talk about it constantly in Slack. You made it safe to speak up." I smiled genuinely. "Then keep speaking up," I said. "Don't wait for permission." She nodded and hurried to catch her group, leaving me with an unfamiliar feeling. Not quite pride, but something deeper. Legacy. That weekend, I finally allowed myself to relax. I boarded a train out of the city, turned off my phone, and watched the landscape blur by. For the first time in months, my thoughts weren't racing with contingency plans or strategies, just calm silence peace. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since this ordeal began. One line stood out. I never sought power. I sought recognition. And when they refused to grant it, I built my own table instead of begging for a seat at theirs. In the weeks that followed, news leaked out Max's leave became permanent. Officially, it was irreconcilable leadership differences. Rumors surfaced about other complaints and terminations quietly swept under the rug before mine. The company culture began shifting. Slowly but perceptibly, exit interviews were revamped, internal training incorporated IP awareness. For the first time, credit attribution was integrated into engineering milestones. Some executives attempted to rewrite history. Emma was always part of the team. One stated at a panel, "We have long valued her expertise." I chose not to correct them, not because it wasn't true, but because those who mattered already knew the truth. And so did the code. The architecture I built remained solid. And finally, my name appeared where it belonged. On the system, in the credits, and woven into the company's story months later, a handwritten letter arrived from the board chair. "Emma, you changed our view of leadership, not through confrontation, but through steadfast resolve. Thank you for demonstrating true authority. David." I kept it tucked away with my severance papers, a reminder of how far I'd come and how far I refuse to fall today. I lead my own consulting firm. I partner with companies who desire more than superficial leadership. They want sustainable systems and empowered people. I select clients carefully. I define my boundaries clearly, and I never sign without thoroughly reading the fine print. Because ultimately, this story wasn't about revenge. It was about value, visibility, and the quiet, unwavering strength of someone refusing to vanish when the system tried to erase her. To anyone who's ever been underestimated, sidelined, or labeled difficult for simply understanding their worth, here's my advice. You don't have to shout to make a difference. You just need to know who you are. And never surrender that power to anyone who doesn't. Because when they fire you thinking they've silenced you, all they've really done is strike the match.